Hi everyone, this is Dr. Victoria Narule, and here with me is Miss Emma Kemkondo from Kenya. And today's discussion, we want to focus on the effectiveness of the climate change laws in Kenya. But before we start, I would like Miss Emmanuel to briefly introduce herself, tell us about her profession background, what she does, and also after her introduction, we shall go straight to the discussion. It's going to be a very short webinar. So just prepare your questions if you have questions. If not, then we shall get started. So Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Dr. Narule. Thank you for inviting me for this session. So my name is Immaculate Kemunto Moranga. Emma works as well. I'm a lawyer by profession in Kenya, and I have a passion for environmental justice and human rights issues, in especially in relation to development and foreign investments in the country. So currently, I work as a campaign officer for the Kenya Civil Society Platform on Oil and Gas. I've worked as an environmental justice fellow with a Pan-African organization called Natural Justice. And I also have some private sector experience. I've worked as a private sector lawyer as well. So my passion really is to sort of create awareness and advocate for environmental and social justice, which now includes climate issues in development agenda, especially for also the global south. So I'm very excited to be here with you. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So the issue of climate change, it's a very important issue following the adoption of the 2015 Paris Agreement. And also we are seeing many countries transitioning to a low carbon economy, but even for countries that are still utilizing their natural resources, they're putting a lot of focus with respect to climate change and environmental protection. So in this respect, I would like to note that previously, last month, we had a webinar on the national climate change laws with Dr. Thomas, who's from the University of Aberdeen, but he wasn't specific on the particular countries. So this would be like our case study to look at the climate change laws in Kenya. So could you please give us a brief background about the climate change laws in Kenya? And you can also make your presentation at this moment.
Okay, so I think for Kenya, talks on climate change go as back as, I'm trying to share my screen, go as far back as the 1992 Rio Summit. That's when Kenya signed the United Nations Framework on Climate Change, but not until 2016 that Kenya enacted a national law that addresses issues to do with climate change. But even before 2016, in 2010, Kenya promulgated a constitution, which a first of its kind, provides for aspects of environmental protection and issues of sustainable development. So the Constitution, for instance, in the preamble, reminds us of the importance of utilizing our resources for the benefit as well of the future generations. Through Article 2 of the Constitution, we are able to apply the UNFCCC in Kenya as part of Kenyan law. The Constitution also provides for the right to a clean and healthy environment, which is a very crucial human right in relation to climate justice. And the Constitution further, why I said it's one of a kind, it further goes on to give obligations on the state in relation to the environment. For instance, it requires the state to utilize its resources in a sustainable manner. So drawing from the obligations created under the Constitution, or the bigger picture in the Constitution, Kenya, I think ahead of the Paris Agreement, Kenya enacted the Climate Change 2016. The Act essentially provides for, it's a regulatory framework for mainstreaming climate change actions into development. It creates various institutions within it. For instance, we have the National Climate Council. We have the Office of the Cabinet Secretary, who is in charge of enacting regulations in relation to implementing the Act itself. The Act also assigns duties and responsibilities both for the public and private sectors. For instance, for the public sector, the Act does provide duties to county governments. That's a decentralized form of governance in Kenya, where we have the national government and we have the county governments. So from the Climate Change Act of 2016, county governments have an obligation to incorporate climate change considerations into their specific county development agendas, and drawing from that obligation, a number of counties in Kenya, while developing the integrated development plans for the specific counties, have incorporated climate change considerations. But in this presentation, I'll just give two examples, such as the county government of Kitui and the county government of Wajir, which are sort of the pioneers of incorporating climate change in their development plans, so that these counties have independent climate change acts in addition to the national climate change. They have their own independent climate change funds separate from the National Climate Change Fund. So that through these integrated development plans, Kitui County and Wajir County have been able to build the capacity of their citizens, or rather their local community, in relation to adapting to climate change issues. Because Wajir County, it's one of the counties in Kenya's semi-arid and semi-arid areas, and Kitui County as well. So they really do bear the brunt of climate change. So to that extent, the Climate Change Act of 2016 has been effective, although there's a lot that needs to be done in relation to ensuring that even as counties develop these laws, they do that in a way that is not a copy-paste sort of method, but in a way that's responsive to the specific geographic and local needs of their county governments. Also, from the Climate Change Act, I think the second National Climate Change Plan of Action was formulated and implemented for the period 2018 to 2022. The first plan of action was from the period 2013-2017. So because this is a brief, sort of a brief presentation, I decided to focus on areas that have been that could be considered a success in relation to the Climate Change Act. So we have challenges. Kenya is yet to realize the benefits of a full implementation of the Climate Change Act. Implementation of the climate change obligations go beyond. They require a multidisciplinary approach, and they go beyond the role of the executive. They go beyond the role of the legislature. They have to incorporate private sector actors who play a huge role. So there is still a challenge in mainstreaming climate relations into decision making in Kenya, especially in relation to the extractive sectors, that is the mining sector and the oil and gas. the oil and gas, I'll argue it's probably because it's still a new industry that capacity is being built on, and with it comes unique challenges such as the issues of gas flaring and venting. Although we have a Petroleum Act, we are yet to develop regulations on regulating gas venting and flaring, because from gas venting and flaring, emissions, greenhouse emissions are very likely, and it's an actual threat. Although we have air quality regulations that were enacted under the Environmental Management and Coordination Act, that's Kenya's Act of 1999, my opinion is this new industry of oil and gas comes with it special challenges, which necessitate the formulation of special regulations, be it integrating into the already existing regulations or having them as standalone regulations to regulate the oil and gas industry. I'm also making a case for incorporation of climate change impact assessments into project decision making, which is currently not being done in Kenya. And yeah, those are mainly from where I stand, from my environmental background. Those are the two main challenges that need to be addressed. I know the National Environmental Management Authority is working on regulations on climate change impact assessments. Rather, they are developing a way on how to go about that. And I've seen they have draft regulations in relation to air quality on oil and gas sector. So yeah, that's good progress. But the act is now for 5 years old. There's a lot that needs to be done, to be honest. But I think we are making we are making progress, however slow. And these are challenges not only unique to Kenya, but unique to most global South countries and economies. So Dr. Victoria, that will be my presentation. It was a very brief presentation, and I welcome comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I would like to actually invite Cynthia, because I know she's here. She's one of the people who are attending. And I know she's Kenyan, and she's doing some work on, not really on climate change, but I would like to see if she has any comments on your presentation.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It was a good presentation. We hope going forward, we can just liaise and see. Of course, Kenya is making significant progress in terms of climate change, especially in Africa, being the first country to enact legislation on this. So it is a step. We have a long way to go, obviously, but yeah, it is a step, and it was a good presentation.
Any questions?
Not for me, but Victoria, thank you.
All right, I see we have other participants. Do you have any questions before I ask my own question? All right, so I'll go ahead and ask my own question. So you've made a great presentation, and we are seeing Kenya has made lots of progress with respect to enacting the relevant laws. But in your opinion, how effective are these laws? Can they really be implemented? Because on the African continent, we've seen we have lots of laws in different areas, be it in the energy sector, and laws that are attempting to protect the environment and so on. But the issue has always been with implementation. So how effective are these laws, and how practical are they to be implemented in Kenya?
Thank you, Dr. Nalile. So, on the effectiveness of the climate change laws in Kenya, I'll say so far we've seen a bit of progress. That's implementation, especially in relation to decentralization of climate action to counties. To that extent, I'll say the act has been effective in decentralizing climate action. However, successful implementation would require sectoral approaches towards climate action. And currently, I'm aware of a number of sectoral approaches. That's from the forestry sector, that's from the agricultural sector, from the private, private sector, that's manufacturing. So the challenges comes in when there's an overlap, and these policies are not coordinated enough to steer into one direction. And in relation to the act, it creates duties to private actors, and there has been people have said there have been opinions that the climate change was rushed, for the Paris agreement in 2015. But then I think it's capable of effective implementation, although that will take a lot of political goodwill and a lot of transparency, and actually a lot of accountability, because the Cabinet Ministry for Environment is required to report to the National Assembly on the progress that is being made in mainstreaming climate change considerations into development and other decision making. So far, I'm not really aware on how that is working, or whether at all that's even happening. So the act, it's capable of being implemented, but a lot has to go into it.
All right, thank you very much for that. And then my other question is, because with implementation, we have to think about implementation at the national level, but also implementation at the local level. How sure are we that people in rural areas, in rural Kenya, people who are not educated, people who are not so aware about the impacts of climate change, obviously they experience them, but they don't know how it's likely to affect them in future. So how effective can we ensure that everyone gets into this movement of protecting the environment? Because we are seeing many people, especially in rural areas, we're seeing lots of deforestation because most people are relying on biomass. We're seeing lots of issues and activities that are likely to affect the environment. And so with respect to implementation, do the climate change laws in Kenya take into consideration those local people or people in rural areas, and how these laws can be implemented in those areas? So for even people who don't understand English, I know Kenya most people use Kiswahili, but still you have to think about the uneducated people. So in your opinion, how effective are the laws with respect to the people in rural areas?
That's actually a very good question, Victoria, because there's this aspect of tapping into indigenous knowledge to enforce adaptation to climate change issues, and also to mitigation. Adaptation in way that there is traditional and indigenous knowledge in relation to drought resistant crops, in relation to drought resistant plants, in relation to weather predictions and response mechanisms. So the much I'm aware of is that the Climate Change Act for Wajir County has actually taken into consideration the aspect of using indigenous knowledge to address the challenges of climate change. Also, the Kenya National Climate Change Plan of Action also does refer to the use of indigenous knowledge to facilitate adaptation to climate change and also climate change mitigation.
All right, thank you very much for that. And I think we don't have any more questions unless if we have questions from the participants. I see, okay, there's a question here. Cynthia, would you like to just make that comment?
Yes, it's just an addition. I think I saw the other day, in addition to Wajir and Kitui counties, Busia is on board as well. So that was just a small addition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so since we don't have any more questions, and I think I've exhausted my own questions, and I'm really impressed by your presentation, Immaculate. Sorry, last time I pronounced your name wrong. So would you like to make concluding remarks with respect to your topic and just some takeaways for people, our viewers and other people, especially the policymakers in Kenya? What are your let's say, what are the concluding remarks for the policymakers, Kenyan policymakers, but also for the private sector? Because it's not all about the policymakers, but we also have to think about the private sector. So what are your concluding remarks in that respect?
Thanks, Victoria. So just in closing, I'd like to say policymakers should take into consideration that they should really hold to a high regard the aspect of public participation in formulation of these laws, climate change strategies, climate change policies, climate change actions, because it's through public participation and wider stakeholder engagement that the specific challenges, because I mean, climate action also has aspects of economic interests, economic viability. How will this affect the country? We have questions of moving away from fossil fuels, and I mean, the country just discovered its oil resources. What are the economic implications around it? So I'm advocating for a participatory approach towards climate action and engaging especially local communities, because there's a lot to learn from how these communities have been adapting to issues of climate change, tapping from their traditional knowledge and the local and the indigenous knowledge as well. So a participatory approach towards climate action. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much for that. And I think this marks the end of our webinar. I just want to remind our viewers that we are live on YouTube. So for people who have missed, for people who haven't attended, they'll be able to watch the video afterwards. And do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and watch all the other videos featuring different experts from different countries. So this marks the end of our webinar. Thank you very much for the brilliant presentation. And I hope we can stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.